Thank you all so very much for taking time out of your busy day to be a part of our Sticking to Goals Through Life's Disruptions, brought to you by the Wellness Team in partnership with the Training and Development Team of Columbus City Schools. At this time, I'll turn it over to Smita to introduce our facilitator for the day.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We have Erica Cook here, our partner from Ohio Health, to present Sticking to Goals Through Life's Disruptions. We so appreciate everyone joining in today. And I just want to make a quick mention. I did just put in the chat box to take the survey at the end of this training. Your name will be entered in a drawing to win a prize package from the wellness team. So make sure to fill that out. I just dropped it in the chat, but I will do it again at the conclusion of this session. So I will go ahead and kick it over to Erica. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Hello, and thank you all for joining today. As they so kindly introduced, my name is Erica Cook. I am one of the wellness consultants with Ohio Health. So I'm excited to be back with you all. So I wanted to turn my camera on to say hi. I will take it off while I present, and then I'll come back on with you all at the end. So there we go. Find it a little easier this way. Okay, so our topic of sticking to goals through life's disruptions. I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think this is probably a topic that we can all resonate with, right? We set a goal, it's going great. We're feeling really motivated, really strong, and then something happens. And then we, as I hear many people say, we fall off the wagon, or, things get derailed, and it may take some time to, get back to it, or to kind of, get back to working to that goal or find our way. So it is something that is normal. It's something that happens to all of us. Right? We often set a goal and we expect this linear trajectory, but then life happens, right? We get busy, things come up, it becomes harder to focus on the goal that we've set. And so my goal for this session today is that I hope that you can walk away with some tools and some strategies that can help you continue moving forward even when we have those disruptions. So to continue moving forward, working toward, whatever it is you're wanting to achieve along your well-being journey, because we know we're going to have disruptions. We know we're going to have challenges. And so again, hopefully I'll provide some tools for you today that you can kind of add to that wellness toolbox and that you can utilize as you work on those goals. All right, so our learning objectives for today. First, understand the fear versus the hope mindset and how emotions are tied in. We'll recognize how practicing hope requires goal setting, and we'll learn new tools and strategies for setting goals. And so, when we're looking at these learning objectives, you may be thinking, all right, how are these, related to just trying to work on a goal? But our mindset, our perspective is key in allowing us to continue moving forward. And so that is where this hope mindset comes in. But we also experience a fear mindset. So it's really a continuum that we're going to look at. And we'll talk about how it's kind of like it's a cycle, right? We need to set goals to have a hope mindset, but we need to cultivate a sense of hope to continue moving forward toward our goals. So again, we'll talk about all of this as we go through. And so this really is our continuum to get us to continue moving forward. And so when we think about our first learning objective, understanding the fear versus the hope mindset, this continuum can help give us an idea of how we can learn to move through the fear zone and find ourselves into the growth zone, because that's where we're making change, right? That's where we're accomplishing our goals or working on them, and where we're, growing ourselves. And it takes hope to be able to move through the different zones. And so we have to also, kind of this middle zone, we have to learn in order to grow. I know one of my managers told me one time, if everything went perfectly, how would you grow? How would you learn? Now, I'll be honest, at the time, I really had wished everything would have went perfectly, but she had a very valid point, and it was kind of one of those pausing moments of that's true. I can't argue that. I can't argue that statement. As frustrating as it may be sometimes when we do want everything to just go as planned, we want that linear trajectory toward our goals. And I use this continuum. You'll see on here, this continuum was originally COVID specific. So some of the examples you see falling within each zone are tied to this specific situation. But we can put anything in here, fill in this first little small bubble with anything, right? We always have zones to work through. Whatever challenging situation it is, be it what we've all faced, with the pandemic, or even before, even after, as we continue moving forward, we're still going to have challenges. And I think that's really one of my goals with my presentations right now, is how can we share information with you that you'll be able to continue applying in the future. And so whatever challenge you face, you're going to have a fear, a learning, and a growth zone. You're going to have to be able to work through the learning portion in order to grow. And so if we take a moment to reflect, which zone do you find yourself in most often? Right? Kind of asking yourself, are there situations that precipitate me landing in the fear zone? Are there examples maybe you can point to when you're in the learning or the growth zone? And how do I spend more time in those zones? And so we're going to break it down a little bit. The fear mindset can lead us to freeze, to really not want to go anywhere, to not move forward or do anything. We can feel very stuck. And we can easily sit here due to the challenge that life threw at us, right? And when I'm talking about challenges, it could be something small, it could be something big. A challenge is a challenge. And this can hamper our ability to set and meet our goals. So in order to move out of the fear mindset, we have to first identify where we are emotionally and check in. We have to put a name to what or how we're feeling, and that can help us put some definition around what we're experiencing so then we can deal with it. So when we're thinking about this fear mindset, the things listed on the slide are what our fear mindset really encompasses. So when we're in this zone, we perceive limits. We are rooted in the past or the future, right? Perhaps ruminating what happened in the past, or consistently worrying about what's happening in the future. It can cause us to really seek isolation or to pull back. We don't want to engage, and this can hamper our ability to set and meet goals. So again, taking a moment and asking yourself, do any of these sound familiar to you? And again, we all experience these on some level, right? I'm sure we've all went to set a goal, and while setting that goal, kind of doubted ourselves, right? Kind of thinking, well, it didn't work for me in the past, or perceiving my limits of, I don't know that I can actually do this. So again, we learn to work through this. And as I mentioned, in order to transition out of the fear zone, that requires us to kind of get in touch with ourselves and in touch with our emotions, which for many of us, we tend to either kind of bottle them up, push them aside and move on, or brood in them. We may sit and we may stew in them. And we are human, so that's also going to happen at times, right? And that is okay. But tapping into our emotions and using them to help us is a skill. It is something that takes practice, just like any other skill that we have. And as more research on emotions emerge, we now understand they helped us be adept, and agile, right? So many of us kind of bottle them up, like we talked about, right? We kind of keep them inside until either we just keep them there or something, we have some type of little explosion, right? And that's not necessarily ideal. So it's important to point out though that in them are two different things. Right? Because it is absolutely okay to feel whatever you feel. However you're feeling, that emotion is real for you, and it is okay to feel that way. So that is different, right? Acknowledging it, the feelings and the emotions that you are having. That is one thing. That allows us to name them. Stewing in them, letting them kind of take control of us and really keep us in that fear mindset, right? Where we pull back, where we don't want to engage, seek isolation. That is different. That is where we're sitting in them. That is where we're stewing in them. And so I want to point out that emotions are not a quote unquote bad thing, right? They remind us that we care. And how amazing is that, right? That is so wonderful. But it is critical to learn how to deal with them in a supportive way for your personal well-being. And that takes practice, especially when you have challenges that are kind of ongoing, giving yourself some compassion if you don't get it right the first time, right? If you're like, I'm trying to deal with this emotion, I'm trying to deal with this feeling, I'm trying all these strategies that they tell me to use, and I'm still feeling this way, and that is okay. Keep practicing, right? Keep finding what works for you. And so when we consider kind of opening up to our emotion or connecting to our emotions, it can help to name it and to connect a value being signaled by that emotion, right? Because that emotion is trying to tell us something. Again, it's quite often telling us that we care, right? If we didn't care per se, well, we'd still have the emotion. It would be that we didn't care about something. But for example, I feel lonely. The value I may be signaling is connection. Or if I feel anger, maybe the value I'm signaling is justice. And so if you can kind of start to incorporate that exercise, it can allow us to really feel, from our hearts a bit more than from our head. It can help us to understand how emotion can connect to a value. And then that can help us work from the fear to the hope mindset, right? So again, being compassionate toward yourself and recognizing whatever I'm feeling right now, it's telling me something. And that sometimes requires us to slow down. And sometimes, we get physical sensations in our body, and that can be telling us something, maybe really tight shoulders or feeling really stiff or really sluggish. Just like our emotions are telling us something, our physical body can be telling us something as well. And so when we are talking about hope, right, we've just talked about the fear mindset and what makes up the fear mindset. So we want to kind of define our hope mindset. We used to think that hope was an emotion. We now know that it's not an emotion, but it's a perspective. It's a way of thinking. It is a cognitive process made up of goals, pathways, and agency, right? Pathways meaning that we have the tenacity and perseverance to pursue those goals. And agency meaning believing in our own abilities and most importantly, believing in ourselves, right? A hope mindset perceives opportunity. It's rooted in the present. We talked about how the fear mindset is rooted in the past and the future, but a hope mindset, really the foundation is now. It is the present. Our hope mindset seeks connection and creates space, right? It's going to allow us to continue moving forward, right? So we can hear the positive momentum of the hope mindset is compared to the fear mindset and how kind of opposing they are to one another. And I do think it's important to point out that as we start to bring more awareness to our mindsets and where we are, right, however you're feeling, again, whatever emotions you're having, really trying to do that without judging ourselves, right? Recognizing that if you find yourself in the fear mindset, that is okay. This is how we learn and grow. So the question then becomes, okay, so how do I move forward, right? The topic of today, how do I keep moving forward during really challenging times, or even not so really challenging times, just challenging times? And so we have to practice hope. And I skipped this slide, so I do apologize. Here are the pieces of the hope mindset that we just talked about. But hope takes practice, right? And in order to keep moving forward, we have to get back up. But we have to be going somewhere. So we need some clarification as to what it is we're hopeful for or what we're working toward. So when you're working on a goal and you get sidetracked, right? Cultivating hope, which, like we just talked about, hope is that mindset. It's not an emotion. When we cultivate that mindset of hope, that can help redirect us and once again find ourselves on the path toward achieving this goal. Or let's say when life throws us an unexpected curveball, practicing hope to stay present and focused on what you do have right there in front of you to keep moving forward, right? You can keep living your life, doing your things as you're kind of working your way through whatever it is being thrown at you. And so it'll be helpful to remember a few key strategies that we'll talk about here in just a second. All right, I do want to pause just to kind of share this quote for you because I think it will resonate with many of us. So oftentimes I have just one goal, as you suggest, and I am focused fully on that one goal, the baby steps, etc. Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, there's some crisis in another part of my life. My boyfriend will become enormously demanding. My brother will get hospitalized with a life-threatening illness. My boss will decide there's an emergency that I have to handle overtime, etc. This happens with such frequency that it's almost predictable. Every time I start really buckling down on what I need to do to accomplish my goal, then when I'm thoroughly demoralized and lying around unmotivated, everything else in my life seems to calm down. I'm just left wondering how to pick myself up again. And so maybe this resonates with you, maybe it doesn't. Obviously, the examples in this quote, fill in anything there. We could all provide plenty of examples. But I share for a couple reasons. For one, again, to just, recognize that if you ever feel like you're just left trying to pick yourself back up, you're not alone. This, it's common enough that it made it into this book. So from the source. And sometimes when we can hear we're not alone, that itself can give us hope and kind of take away some of that stress. And so, life events can and will disrupt our progress, but it doesn't have to sidetrack us completely. And I think that's where it can take some practice to get out of the all or none thinking. We can overcome the obstacle just like we overcome any other obstacle. And things will happen, right? The real determination is how do we deal with them? Do we get discouraged and give up? Or do we figure out a way around and keep going? And because the path to every goal is going to have quite a few obstacles. And so we kind of have to anticipate them and find ways to work around them and to keep moving forward. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, and I'll probably mention again, being compassionate toward yourself is really important for that. All right, so thinking about those challenges, anticipate, anticipate, anticipate. When it comes to anticipating, we simply mean thinking ahead. What's on the horizon? What obstacles have you run into in the past that you can learn from, right? We don't know what's going to come our way, but we can start to kind of think about what are the challenges that I have dealt with in the past and how have I overcome them? What strengths do I have to keep moving forward? And when we're trying to kind of deal with those obstacles, those challenges, working to get around them requires that we create space. And this goes back to feeling and labeling the emotion that can help us describe it instead of owning it. So for example, I am sad versus I notice that I'm feeling sad, right? If we are kind of going back to the quote here, left that we're just unmotivated and trying to pick ourselves up. So instead of I'm unmotivated, I'm feeling unmotivated right now. I don't know if you can hear the difference. I can hear a difference from I'm unmotivated versus I'm feeling unmotivated right now, right? I'm labeling myself that I'm not motivated and I'm potentially not going to keep moving forward with this goal versus I'm feeling unmotivated. Okay, I'm human. I'm not always going to be motivated. Even, someone who enjoys exercise, I'm not always going to be motivated to exercise. And that is okay. That is my emotion, my feeling, my experience right now. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to exercise for the next, 6 months. That means in this moment, maybe it's not going to happen right now. Maybe it's going to happen later. Or I recognize this is a feeling. This is how I'm feeling right now. Maybe later today that will change because I'm going to own how I'm feeling. I'm not going to let it own me. Okay, let's get back to our slide. Here we are. So part of this is learning, what we've done and what's worked in the past. Do we fight the obstacle or work on creating space for it, right? Thinking about solutions and being creative with them. And I think one of the most important things is, being willing to try more than one path. And I like to say for any of our, wellness habits or goals or really anything that deals with our health and well-being, I think it's kind of a continuous experiment. We are humans, we are dynamic beings. And so our needs, our wellness, our well-being is going to change. Sometimes what may feel like on a daily basis, or perhaps, a 12-hour basis. And that is okay. So giving yourself permission to not feel like you have to get it right the very first time. That's awesome, right? It feels really good. It's a lot easier and a lot less work when you try a path and it works the first time. But kind of reminding yourself that that's okay if it doesn't, right? Remember what we talked about at the beginning. Our goals are rarely met the first time around. And rarely, are we able to maintain them perfectly. What we want to find is something that fits into our lifestyle. And that means something that we can work around and keep moving forward, even when we have obstacles, even when we find that we're stuck or in that fear mindset, right? So being willing to try more than one path. And quite often, I think we feel like we take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, right? Or maybe you feel like you take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back. But do the math, right? You've still moved forward. Setbacks are part of the journey. Even when you're making setbacks, you're still making forward progress over time, right? And it can be important here to really look at these setbacks as opportunities, right? You're collecting data, you're gathering information, you're learning, okay, this is the path that I tried. Maybe it didn't go as planned or was going as planned, and here we are, another obstacle. It's like the interstate, another detour, another pothole right now. So, you learn, you go a different way. But you have to be kind to yourself. And if you're feeling frustrated, again, Can you use that exercise? I am feeling frustrated, not I am frustrated, right? This is my experience right now. I notice that this is how I'm feeling. And so when we fall, can we get up and learn from it? No one's going to be successful all of the time. And, we will mess up, right? And that sounds so straightforward. And it is okay, because it is true. And I think if we can just be open to that and okay with that, we can take a little pressure off of ourselves to get it perfect. So how can we learn from those disruptions? And so this image on the left here, the plateau of latent potential, this comes from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which I believe our next session really dives into a lot of his work, which I highly, highly recommend. But you can see there, right, what we think should happen. He even puts on there the valley of disappointment and what actually happens. But you can see the trajectory of that arrow. It goes up with time. So you're learning along the way. You're building that toolbox. You're gaining experiences, right? And that's kind of, the things that I've been able to work through, and everyone has, if we can really just take that perspective of, gosh, we're gaining experiences. They're not always the experiences we want by any means, but they're there. And so how can we really harness them in a positive way? All right, so sometimes, it may also require finding new motivation. We may not only, again, quote unquote, get derailed, but demotivated, right? Perhaps we lose motivation. And again, we're humans, we're dynamic, our minds are going to change. And when this happens, we need to find motivation again, or find new motivation, find different motivation. So going back to the basics, right? Going back to, if you have a wellness vision, why did I start this goal in the first place? Do I have a vision for who I want to be, or how I want to show up, or how I want to feel different? What was the reason for this change? And so those can be some really helpful questions to ask as we kind of move forward. And then kind of the last little piece here, and we'll touch a little bit today, but a lot more in the next session. So we talked about how we need goals, pathways, and agency in order to cultivate a hope mindset. So we'll talk a little bit about goal setting. And so 3 really keys that I think can be helpful are, first, less is more, right? Give yourself permission to lower the bar. If you want to read a book, start with 1 page. If you want to organize your house, start with 1 closet, or half a closet, or 1 drawer, right? Give yourself permission to do less. So when you accomplish these goals, you do create that motivation to continue moving forward. Next piece, does this goal speak to you? Is this something that you want to work on, right? Be honest with yourself. Is it something that you are told you should work on? And does this goal align with your values, right? With how you want to show up, let's say, even a year from now. So again, we'll dive more into that in April, I believe. So I'll be excited to continue the conversation on goal setting. And lastly, go with the flow, right? As we're all very, very well versed in, but we must be willing to be flexible when we're working on achieving goals. Change comes at us, right? Trying to accept and embrace the change, even in our routines. But also giving yourself permission to feel however you're feeling about that change, right? Use some of those strategies we talked about earlier, acknowledging, being okay, recognizing how you're feeling, but then finding strategies for you to move forward, not allowing that to keep you still from keeping you from moving or cultivating that whole mindset. So we must learn to accommodate the changes that are thrown at us and still head toward our goal, right? With compassion, with practice, with We like to say trial and experimentation instead of trial and error. You're not messing up, you're learning. And that is how we grow. All right, so I will pause here. I know that leaves about a minute. If you do have any comments or questions, let me get this back on. Please let me know. Let me open the chat box. There we are. And thank you all for listening. I do hope there's something that you can pull from here and take forward into the rest of your day and your wellness journey.
Thank you all again for taking your time to be a part of our Sticking to Your Journey session or Sticking to Your Goals session. We really hope that you were able to take something back. The one thing that stuck to my mind was the hope mindset. I plan to implement that at some rate throughout the rest of the day. But thank you all again for taking time out to be a part of this session. Wellness team, thank you. And Ms. Erica, we really appreciate you for being a part of this conversation. You all have a wonderful day. Please take time to complete the survey that is inside of the chat. Thank you.